So recently, I bought me a brand new PC to replace my old budget build I've been rocking for the past 5 years. And I'm here to vlog about my experience of making, building, and testing my new PC. Now bear with me, this is the first time I've done any sort of vlog type video, so my eyes might be all over the place. But yeah, the old 4-core i5 and 750 Ti system I had has been struggling to give me over 30 FPS while trying to stream and play games at the same time. So let's just run more demanding titles. So, I thought it's finally time to think about building and making a new PC. Now, PC building itself isn't brand new to me. I have this experience throughout my whole life with PC building. My dad's done builds and had me help him since the early 2000s, but the component selection part is new to me. So for the past year and a half, I've been learning at the current landscape of PC building through YouTube, Reddit, PC Part Picker, Logical Increments, all trying to figure out what do I need for a new system. Now, to know what I need to know my needs in a PC. So my needs in a PC are both atypical and typical, with the typical being gaming and streaming, as I mentioned earlier. I want to be able to game for my current monitor, which is at 1080p 144Hz, as well as the option to do 1440p 144Hz in the future. Then for streaming, I want the computer to be able to handle 720p 60 FPS stream settings up to 900p 60 FPS. Do note the lower option because you do want to keep your stream settings down, your bitrate low on Twitch if you don't have transcoding, so that way everyone can watch. Now the atypical need I have is that I run Ubuntu Linux on my computer, so I'm a Linux guy, like it, rock it, so I think most will understand, what you need in a PC to game and stream with it, but what does running Linux do? Well, it doesn't directly impact your part choice by that much, in terms of compatibility and the like. Aside from some Wi-Fi solutions on motherboards, there's not really much else you need to look at. Oh, it's not going to work on Linux. Graphics cards do have a different sort of thing going on, if you're sort of a Linux guy and you know about that, but I'll get into that later. Now, I guess the core thing about, since I run Linux on my computer, is I run Linux games, It's like, picked a PS4 over an Xbox, so I play PS4 games. So, having Linux games means, well, the Linux ports, so that's kind of all I've been playing for the past 5 years, just games you can buy on Steam, have a Linux version, hit play. But recently, Wine has matured a lot. That's a compatibility layer to play Windows games in Linux. And I really want to use it as well to play some games, so the thing about Wine is that it's more CPU intensive, so it adds more, system requirements for playing games. And I've lived through this. There's a little bit of proof. Played a little bit of games in Doom on my old computer. Main game being Doom 2016, which had audio crackling issues along with low performance. Which low performance just because my old system was low mid-range. I did also briefly think about building my PC around VFIO, which is using sort of Windows Virtual Machine, switching back and forth. But that's kind of expensive, you need 2 graphics cards for that, and it's a little limiting with your motherboard and stuff, so I think native gaming and Wine should be enough for me for the next 5 years. Native gaming alone's been enough for me for the past 5 years, so should be good. So with all these needs dialed in, it's time to pick all the parts that I need. So for the parts, I used PC Part Picker, and I made a PC Part Picker list where I have both my new system build, my old build, so I'll link those in the description so you can see my full thoughts on picking each individual part in the build itself. And for the build itself, you can actually watch the whole thing too. I have a VOD for my Twitch stream that I'll also have linked around somewhere. So what I'm going to go over in this video is just sort of the core of the system that I picked. So with my needs in mind, I wound up making an i9 9900K and an RTX 2060 based PC. So why'd I pick such a high-end CPU, the 9900K? Well, I knew I wanted 8 cores, 16 threads for the stream for FFmpeg and OBS. That was just sort of my gut feeling. There really isn't a lot of hard science on the internet when you just Google does FFmpeg eat up a lot of threads, but that is the case, that is true, so I'm glad I was thinking that. And then meanwhile, on the other side of things for games and games in Wine, I need that Intel single-threaded performance. I just want it. I play source games, unoptimized games as well. So really want that frequency there. And I was okay with allocating a larger part of my total system budget to the CPU to avoid any compromises with getting a Ryzen 2700X or an i7 8700K or 9700K. Since I picked the CPU, I also wanted to pick parts to go around the CPU for overclocking especially. Now, don't think you should get this high end of a CPU without overclocking it, honestly. Even for me, who has never overclocked before. Went into it wanting to overclock. Made sure I picked a good motherboard. Went with a high-end air cooler for easy use over water cooling. And grabbed me some Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut to go with it too. For the graphics card, as I mentioned, I picked an RTX 2060. To me, this is the most compelling upper mid-range card to pick. There's nothing really compelling for under 600 for 1440p, 144 FPS. So by the time I upgrade my monitors, 1 or 2 generations of graphics cards will be out. Maybe Navi will shake things up. And it was the last part I picked the graphics card. I was waiting on the 1660 Ti. That was sort of like mid-March. But when it came out, it just sort of accentuated the fact that 2060 seems to be the best price to performance sort of card. Now, being a Linux head, graphics cards also are a hot topic for another reason. There's team open source and team closed source. AMD has the open source thing going on, which I do really like. That's obviously a reason I use Linux. NVIDIA has the closed source thing going on, which is a separate blob. But for AMD being open source, that means you have to update your whole system to update the graphics driver. While with NVIDIA, since it's separate, it can be updated separately. Now, for most people, this isn't really a problem, but I also use a PCIe capture card with its own separate driver blob. So if I'm chained with one driver blob keeping me on a stable Ubuntu release, then having another driver blob seems to be a better option. Now finally, for the case, this is, another part that I put a lot of thought into picking. Affects the outer looks, the thing I'm going to look at all the time. Now, RGB and tempered glass isn't really my thing, so that rules a lot of things out. And then I learned that cases really affect airflow via Gamer's Nexus, so went with a case based on airflow, had to pick between the Lee & Lee 011 Air and the Fractal Design Meshify C. But that decision was kind of already made for me at that point, because the 011 Air doesn't fit the best air coolers. Doesn't fit the Noctua NHD15 I had picked. So, went with the Meshify C. It looks nice, I like it anyways. Picked the one without tempered glass as well. And yeah, that was all the parts that I picked majorly for the build. But as for the build itself, it went pretty smooth for a first build. If you want the full details, once again I'll mention again, check the PC part picker post in the VOD. In summary, I'll say that, just the modern experience of building a computer seems pretty nice. Modern cases are really nice to build in with cable management holes and PSU shrouds. Main things I was nervous about in the build was getting the CPU and the CPU cooler in, but both of those wound up being simpler than I thought they would. On the topic of the CPU cooler, that was another final issue I thought I would have. I thought I'd have RAM clearance issues with the large G-scale RAM I had picked, but I managed to squeeze the fan right on top of the RAM and barely get the side panel on. So as long as the RAM doesn't get hot and melt the fan, I should be good. And when I got everything put together the first time, the PC posted, which, makes it a smooth build. I got everything all set up and installed, except for one thing I thought I was going to set up. So before on my old computer, I had a Windows 7 boot drive as well. I did occasionally dual boot, though very rarely actually booted the Windows 7 drive. But here on this computer, it's not going to be an option, because apparently Z390 does not have USB drivers. It is technically runnable, it'll boot and everything, but the only way to control the computer is with the Ethernet port. That thankfully has a driver. So I could use like TeamViewer, Remote Desktop to control the computer, at least for some reason if I need to, which I did. So NVIDIA requires you to use GeForce Experience for some reason to redeem your game, so did wind up doing that begrudgingly. But yeah, that's probably the end of my Windows 7 adventures with this PC, unless I want to get a PCIe USB card, which we'll see. After getting everything all set up on the computer software-wise, I set up the overclocks. I did XMP on the RAM, that was easy. It's a one-time switch. And I did the CPU, so I followed Gigabyte's OC guide. It was a first-time user, just kind of had to follow it, not really knowing what was going on. Got 5 GHz, but unstable with AVX loads tested. And this kind of is a sticking point right now, because with Gigabyte's current firmware on the motherboard I picked, the AVX offset seems bugged and always applies, so I have to pick whether I just want no offset or basically no overclock. So go with no offset for now. I think until, H.265 or something, or AVX becomes really common in games, it shouldn't be a problem. And yeah, when I got my overclock further dialed in on the CPU, for some more reading, learning what load line calibration is and everything, got 5 GHz at 1.315 E-core and high LLC. I was getting 5.1 stable even, but as far as I know, I'm getting voltage spikes I don't like. I might mess with it more. We'll see. On the GPU end, I use the Green with Envy app for Linux that runs basically like an MSI Afterburner sort of app. Got plus 67 on the core and plus 920 on the memory. Can also set the power limit up, but that required a little bit of Googling to find a level 1 forum post to actually get that to save. Not that it seems to matter, since the graphics card doesn't really go above the power limit that's stock at 190 watts. And then as a final graphics card overclocking mechanism, just at the fan curve to be more aggressive, since getting temperatures down is really an important thing on NVIDIA cards, and it doesn't really make it that much louder. And speaking of noise, I guess I can speak about the thermals, the noise, all that type of stuff. So, at an idle, this computer is actually pretty cool and quiet. CPU and GPU are about 35 degrees Celsius. And it's quiet partially due to the PSU and GPU fans just stopping completely at idle. Under medium load, there is some fan noise. It's sort of, fine fan noise. I picked Noctua fans, so it's not really an obnoxious noise. But once you get under a load, then it becomes a wind tunnel. Now, by wind tunnel, I mean like a really high load. So like you're fully stressing with Prime 95 or something. If you're streaming a demanding game, then it's a little less of a wind tunnel, and CPU temps for me stay about under 76 degrees Celsius, so under the danger mark for 9900K, decently cool, I guess. GPU stays under 68 degrees Celsius, but that's partially because of my fan curve. So again, every degree like above 55, I think, on NVIDIA is a bit of performance. Finally, speaking about the final performance just in games and stuff on this computer, it's like night and day between my old computer. My old build struggled to get above 60 FPS in a TF2 pub consistently without streaming. And now, while streaming, I can get above 100 FPS. I play Doom 2016, I get 200 FPS with CPU encoding. While before I was having to use GPU encoding to stream, and it was only getting like 45 FPS, so yeah, night and day. But why just take my word for the difference in performance? Let's show some actual numbers. I took my old and my new system and did a few basic benchmarks on both, using settings that represented what I would use on my old system. Starting with the Unengine superposition, first I ran the benchmark at 1080p medium, with the old build getting an average of about 22 FPS, and the new build getting an average of about 103, where GPU temps were actually higher, however. I then took a sample screenshot in the game mode of superposition in the starting area, getting 23 FPS in the old build and 107 FPS in the new build. I also ran the benchmark at 1080p extreme for curiosity on the new build, and got a console-like 30 FPS average. Moving on to CSGO, I took my own demo of spectating a casual round as a benchmark, and went from about 140 FPS to 284 FPS in the time demo, although with a bit more variability. While this is a good result for my old system, this doesn't account for the extra performance reduction from streaming as well, something that my 4th-thread i5 really suffered from. Another Source Engine game that showed similar results was TF2. Here I used the popular benchmark demo from Team Fortress TV, as well as my own demo from January of last year. The frames measured are about the same as CSGO, surprisingly, going from about 140 FPS average to 290 FPS average, but with increased variability. To round off the list of lighter esports titles I play, Rocket League was kinda benchmarked. I went into training mode, sat still for a few seconds, and snapped a screenshot. Frame rates went from about 130 standing still to 200 standing still. The more demanding game that I tested was Shadow of Mordor, which is one of the few odd Warner Bros. Linux ports. With low settings I used to play through the game, the old system reached nearly 60 FPS average, while the new system reached about 180 FPS average. although this game has quite a bit of variance. I also took the opportunity to mess with higher settings, reaching an average of 140 FPS on medium and 118 on ultra. To round out my benchmarks, I try to cover a more productivity-oriented task of extracting an archive. Using the time command with tar to time the uncompressing and compressing of a Google Takeout archive, tar.gz extract times went down by about a third, from 9 seconds to 3 seconds, gzip compression about halved, going from 31 seconds to 16 seconds, while bzip compression decreased the least, going from about 1 minute 48 seconds to 59 seconds. I really like this new build. The 3 big changes that might come in the future are another SSD for storage, more tweaks to the CPU overclock, and a higher-end graphics card for 1440p. Maybe Navi will shake things up by the time I get a new monitor. And yeah, I guess in conclusion, I hope you guys enjoyed me rambling about my new PC build and benchmarks. Normally don't mention comments or anything, but I'll say comment if you like this video, if you wanted me to cover something else. You can check me out on Twitch and on YouTube here for VODs of the PC build and me refurbing my old PC. And yeah, I guess I hope all of you have a wonderful day or night. Thanks for watching, and bye.